Welcome to Biotech Stage. It's stage where we talk with various biotech professionals from the globe and also from the whole spectrum of job functions, including president, vice president, directors, team leaders, entrepreneurs, and most importantly, the people who work on the bench. That means scientists. Today, our guest is Dr. Mike Coleman. Dr. Mike Coleman has been in the industry for almost 3 decades and actually little over 3 decades. He started his career as a scientist at a local gene therapy company in Texas and then slowly and steadily grew in his positions both in terms of higher responsibilities and growth. He became chief executive officer of a company right here in Texas in Generon. So today we are going to discuss with him lot of important things, lot of things that are going to be very inspirational, very informational, and most importantly very interesting. So Dr. Mike Coleman, welcome to this stage.
Thank you, Arun. It's nice to be here. Good to see you again.
Mike, the very first thing that I wanted to ask with you, you got so much of experience working in this industry, and industry has changed a lot. And you also moved from one company to another. So there must have been a lot of challenges for you when you were changing jobs or when you were weaving through difficult situation in the biotech industry. So we just wanted to get some feel from you. How did you manage all those changes, and how did you tackle difficult times?
Thanks for that question. Actually, all times require, I think, a positive attitude, and generally, I have had a positive outlook on life. Also, I uh, have a lovely wife of 38 years now, and so she's been with me since really early graduate school, and we've accomplished this as a team. So that also helps to have a positive outlook. I grew up on a farm, and I sort of think I have a very easy job in all the positions that I've been in compared to my mom and my dad, and the issue of trying to always borrow money and pay it back to the bank to farm and things like that. So the stress that they had was, in my opinion, orders of magnitude more than my stress. I think specifically in companies, advice I could give to folks is, certainly always try to commensurate with your, job responsibilities, build your network. Obviously, if you have a chance to meet people in other companies or interact with them, whether it be vendors, collaborators, and so forth, make sure you try to make a positive impression. Follow up on those contacts, build your network. That has always helped me in terms of finding new positions, hiring people, and so forth.
Mhm.
And on the other side, try not to make enemies. So it's a small world, and it's best to try to solve any issues you have constructively with a positive attitude versus burning bridges. So that's another thing, is that you don't want to be known as someone who is difficult to work with. That
Yeah,
will
that's
come back to bite you. And I would say those are the two pieces of advice I can give.
yeah, that's a very good advice. I mean, really, biotech world is huge, but same time, it's a very small world, and you never know who you are going to see again, and sometime your own action could bite you. So yeah, that's a very good advice. So, Mike, biotech industry has changed a lot. I mean, in past 30 years, it used to be focus on simple maps, and now slowly and maps being grown or cell culture being done in uh, DMEM plus 10% serum, and then slowly it changed to serum free conditions and animal free conditions, then chemically defined medium. And now there is a more focus on cell and gene therapy. And even in that, in cell therapy, basically it was stem cells. Now it is slowly growing to T cells, NK cells, and you name the cell from the in the buffy coat or the white blood cells, and they are trying their best to use as a therapeutic agent. So where do you see the this particular biotechnology is going in coming 10 years or so?
I think there are certain intractable problems in healthcare. Some of them are self inflicted, like diabetes and obesity. To some extent, even cognitive decline among the elderly population is linked to Western diet and lifestyle. So I think there will be a lot of focus on these areas because they drive certainly patient disability and healthcare costs. And so there will be now I think we're going to be in an environment where perhaps funds for R&D, at least from the public sector, will
Hmm.
be not going up. maybe even reduced. There will be more competition for funds. And so I think there potentially could be some, change in the makeup of funding. Say a large amount of money has gone into oncology, and there will be some, I would suggest, movement of that funding away into areas like dementia research,
Mhm.
obesity, and so forth. The other point, back to the cell and gene therapy, particularly cell therapy area, certainly there will have to be a good return on investment because cell therapies are very expensive to produce. But for certain types of applications, there may be opportunity to use these types of therapies for diseases that have been traditionally drugged with small molecules or monoclonal antibodies. So that's another area where I think we can already see that, where cell therapies are now being used in autoimmune disease in some areas where traditionally they've only been used in oncology. They're starting to the development is starting to branch out into other indications. So I think that presents an opportunity.
The one thing which I wanted to ask you, there is a lot of talk on the artificial intelligence, and it is affecting every sector of the industry. So, how do you think AI is going to play a part on biotechnology, whether it is traditional maps or cell and gene therapy?
Well, computers, you and I have grown up with computers. I remember in graduate school getting my 286, and I I learned Pascal. Not that knowing Pascal would be very uh, useful these days, but I think our generation, and certainly everyone younger than us, has grown up with computers as a tool that we use for work. AI is really enhancing the usefulness of that tool. I use AI almost every day in my work, whether it's to help me in writing, summarizing research. I think on a larger scale, at the, let's say, the large models that are focused on specific data sets, whether it's for drug discovery, clinical trial design, patient selection, these sorts of things. I mean, AI will have an impact on all of these factors. I'm not sure that AI is yet there to trust it to make what I would call high impact decisions. So if I'm using it to make a first draft or help me with the first draft of something, and it makes an error or has what in AI speak is called a hallucination, that's not a problem because I will catch that in proofreading and improving. I think the same thing is currently the case in computer software coding. People are using AI a lot at the early stages of that. But if it relates to how, say, a patient is treated and clinical decision making, that's a very high impact decision. So if the AI is wrong, it could have a much more consequential impacts. I think AI is it's used now, and the use is only going to increase in all aspects, not just in our industry, but in all industries, whether it's from
Mhm.
HR, financial reporting, or over on the R&D side. And the key will be in the input data and getting access to, I think, to the best input data, and then also having the basically continuous improvement of the prognostication of the models, at least if we're talking about generative AI.
One other thing which I wanted to discuss with you is the public perception about the cell and gene therapy or biotechnology in general, especially after the COVID times. People are more aware of what is the genetic engineering, what is all the genetic manipulations that biotechnology does, and especially nowadays with things like CRISPR, where gene editing could be much easier and much more faster. There are a lot of challenges or a lot of concerns that a lot of people have. So I was just wanted to get your feedback on it, like what companies should do, or what efforts should be done so that public is well educated on different positive aspects about biotechnology.
I will preface this. I don't want to be overly critical of, during the COVID crisis, scientists and regulators that were, trying to manage that at a governmental level. It's easy for me to sit here and be critical after the fact. But I think generally, I would say scientists, we need to be humble and realize that we don't have all the answers. If you look back at particularly the vaccines. And I've spent some time the last several years working on vaccines for respiratory diseases. The COVID vaccines, even the mRNA vaccines, it was awesome and a heroic effort that they could be scaled up for manufacturing and gotten into patients as quickly as they were. And I think they clearly provided benefit to reduce the severity of disease, particularly in populations at risk. But there's not a lot of evidence that they reduce transmission. And the younger, more healthy populations, although there was benefit, the risk benefit equation was not as, let's say the equation was not skewed as much in favor of benefit as it was in the older populations. Some of the mandates that came down perhaps oversold what the effect of, that's my opinion as a scientist, although I'm not I'm not Dr. Fauci, and I have great respect for him from what I have seen. I think he probably did his best in a very difficult time. But I think particularly, in some areas where patients were locked, or not patients, but citizens were locked down, and it was mandated that they get the vaccines. That was done with the best available knowledge at the time, but certainly without all the information that was needed to make a good decision. And in retrospect, it's clear that some of that stuff it probably went too far, particularly keeping kids out of school and things like that. So that has led to less trust of scientists and regulators. And some people believe that somehow there's some secret agenda. Obviously, we need to be humble and just admit that, we do the best that we can. And sometimes we make decisions without all the data that we would like to have. And sometimes we will not be, completely right. But there's no agenda other than, doing the best for the public and health. The other area where I think, not to get too long-winded here, it's shocking how really uninformed many people are in the lay public about basic biology. I would have thought that someone with a college degree, you would have had to have at least some biology class, would know, given that it's 2025 or even the pandemic 2020, we're 50 years after, David Baltimore and recombinant DNA, basically these sorts of things. So the fact that people don't understand what mRNA is in the most general sense, and they have trouble following that we have DNA and the cell produces mRNA to encode for specific proteins. I mean, it's just, the lay public is really illiterate. And so they unfortunately are willing to believe things and there's a lot of misinformation and no policing of misinformation, particularly on social media. In my opinion, there should be some consequence for folks that propagate misinformation on social media that can lead to, public health issues. But that's just my opinion. Others say it's my free speech to say inaccurate things if I want to. But there was a lot of misinformation propagated, and people have so little baseline information, they were just willing to believe the misinformation. So I think going forward, really improving science education, and whether it has to do with climate science or basic biology related to how vaccines work or what mRNA is, whatever. I would hope that we have our kids in school learning more about this, and maybe they can come home and explain to their mom and dad, who maybe didn't have this in school, what this is. But that part as a scientist was extremely frustrating, because folks that I believed, even to some extent, medical doctors, I had interactions with medical doctors, and I have to say I have immense respect for many of the clinicians that I come across with regards to folks working on cancer clinical trials and so forth. They are very capable people, very dedicated people. But my goodness, some of the folks out on the internet, general practitioners, whatever, giving advice about things, their level of knowledge or their unwillingness to adhere to sort of, settled science was very frustrating.
Okay. Yeah. And actually, I agree with you 100% that it is very strange that it has been almost 50 years since DNA was discovered, or the structure, the double helical structure, or more than 50 years. And
Oh
people are
yeah,
still,
that's like
yeah,
that's from the 1950s.
yeah.
I'm
And
just talking
people,
about recombinant DNA. When I started graduate school, it was much more of an effort to clone something or to make a, to subclone something into a plasmid. Now that's
Yeah.
nothing. But still, these are tools that exist in everyday life, whether it's engineering plants or whatever. And again, I'm not going to get into whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Then
Yeah, yeah, and it's really surprising that people don't know about messenger RNA. And I would also say that genetic code was discovered probably in 1965, 67, something like that. And not many people know that there are 64 codons or those kind of things. But a lot of people probably think that genetic code is part of a computer code.
yeah,
So it's strange. They may know the whole computerized code for computer language, but genetic code not many people know. But your points are very valid, so thank you very much for your feedback on the public perception. So Mike, the next thing, actually this particular podcast is geared towards the younger generation, the people who are entering into the biotech workforce with bachelor's, masters, or even PhD degree. So I just wanted to get some of your advice for younger generation, what they need to focus on, what qualities they need to polish, what qualities they need to or they must have, or what are the things that they need to watch out for?
sure. Well, certainly choose to do something and study something that you like. Um, it's always a necessity that you get through courses that you may not like or find very dry. So even if you are very interested in life sciences, it's not that the whole degree curriculum, if you're still a student, is going to be only courses that you find very interesting, or perhaps the professor in those courses is someone that you like to listen to or follow. So sometimes you just have to bear down and get through it. But generally speaking, if you aren't interested in what you're doing, if that's not your first, love in terms of what your career path is, then you should really look for something else. So find something that you love, because once you
Mhm.
find something that you love, it really won't seem like work when you're putting forth maximum effort, and you'll be able to give more of yourself. And I think ultimately be happier in the long term. And part of that for me is actually the type of people I like to work around as well. I feel very blessed to have been, in this field and have met many people, including folks from like yourself who are from other countries. And that has really benefited me, I think, as a person, and opened my eyes to different points of view and different cultures. And so that's also been I would say, a secondary benefit to choosing science. But they choose something that you love. The other point or piece of advice I could give would be certainly stick to it. I think you can't give up sometimes so easily, and I've seen a lot of people that give up too easily. The other point is sometimes it doesn't mean that you're giving up to choose a different career path. And when I was going through graduate school and being in my postdoctoral work, I did not think I would do anything other than be a professor at a university, writing research grants, teaching students and such. That's what I thought I would be doing. And, due to both opportunities and then some things that did not work out in my favor, those were mostly due to my own, sort of not putting my best foot forward, whatever. I ended up, I mean, it was opportunities to go into industry. And then when I had the opportunities to potentially go back into academia, I was not able to capitalize on that, but it all worked out well in the end. And I found a home in industry, and, had the opportunity to work in multiple companies over the years, both in small biotech, publicly traded biotech, and even large pharma for a time. I appreciate very much having the perspective from that. So, the other piece of advice is sometimes if you have one specific job that is your goal and that doesn't work out, don't feel like you're a failure because you go into a different job in the same field. I have a number of colleagues who have ended up branching out from, say, R&D scientists to work on the regulatory side or the quality assurance side or the biomanufacturing side. And those are all, science-based jobs, and I think they're very happy. And many of those people have done very well professionally,
Mhm.
including folks that have gone on to become, lawyers and IP lawyers. So I think, keep your eyes open, look for opportunities, but really first and foremost, do something that you like.
Okay, okay. And anything that they need to watch out for? Anything they need to stay away from,
Yeah,
like
well,
conflict?
I mean, I've been very fortunate. So it's better to be lucky than good. And so I certainly can't say that everything that wherever I've ended up, I have to chalk a lot of that up just to being, in the right place at the right time, which is good fortune, not necessarily anything specifically I did well on my part. I would say that, again, back to something I said earlier, be someone who is constructive. Always look at problems as things that can be solved constructively. And if you're in a situation where you're being asked to do something that you believe is ethically incorrect, it's probably best to step away than to, I mean, obviously you don't want to be involved in anything that's criminal or something that might hurt patients. And then you have to speak up. But otherwise, I would say try to be constructive. And even if you leave a job that you're at and go to another job, try to always leave on good terms. And you never know when, those same people that you may have worked with 20 years before may call you up with an opportunity. I remember, here about 3 or 4 years ago, it ended up not being something that I had. It really wasn't a fit for me at the time, but a person who was my boss at a company I worked at previously, and I left that job for a really good opportunity. And I think at the time that person was not happy because it created a hole when I left. They were understanding that this was a good opportunity for me. And anyway, that person contacted me. I hadn't talked to them in 10 years, and they said, "Hey, I have this company that, I'm working with, whatever. They just got VC funding. They're looking for this senior level position and so forth." So I was very flattered that I was contacted. But, that's just an example where you never know when, your interaction with somebody, if you leave that on a positive note, then it may come back and offer an opportunity in the future.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Thanks for all the advice for the younger generation. So, all the younger generation, please listen to what Dr. Mike Coleman has just mentioned. This is a very important lesson, and I can tell you, I know Dr. Mike Coleman for last 30 years, and these are you are listening from a very successful person.
Can I add one thing, Arun?
Sure,
I want to add one thing, and this is,
sure.
again, shows I'm a scientist, not always thinking with my business hat on, but money makes the world go round. And if I could do
Mhm.
one thing differently when I was coming through school, I would either, when I was in school, have gotten a minor in business or finance, or I would have taken much more time early in my career to learn the business side.
Mhm.
We're all out there to help patients, but there has to be a working business.
Mhm.
And that's sometimes the hardest challenge for someone coming out of the lab, and sometimes even more so for someone who is like myself, was a PhD that had a postdoc and was deep into the science coming into a company. There is an expectation that you're going to have a product, and that product will have a market, and there's a cost to get that product to the market. There's a risk that product won't be successful, and all of those variables need to be factored into how decisions are made about resourcing different R&D projects, and how the company is managed and going forward. And so I've learned by doing a fair amount about those aspects of the business, but I would have been much better served if I had more formal education in that area going into the biotech business.
Ah, okay, okay.
If I was in academia, that subject would have probably never come up, but it came up very acutely the first company I worked in, and it's stayed with me ever since. And certainly once you rise to the level of executive management, such as a CEO or even a CSO, those types of decisions you have to make, that governs a lot of your decision making. So you need to
Yeah.
be, very well versed in the terminology, and the sort of general nature of business and finance.
Okay. So doing science, thinking science, working on science is great, but same time also learn the business aspect.
If you want to
Money
be in
part, yes.
biotech, yes, because biotech is a business.
Yeah. Biotech, yeah.
just like energy production, or Google or Microsoft,
Mm-hmm.
a company making building products. They're all businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And the product is different. The product development process is different, but they all need capital, and they all compete for capital.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the regulations, have an impact on that as well. So you have to factor all of that in.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mike. So with this, I think for the keeping time constant in the mind, I think that is all for today's talk or today's discussion. Although I wanted to do a rapid fire segment in which I'm going to ask you 10 different questions on status of biotechnology in India, and please scale on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being best, almost there, or strongly agree, depending upon the question. And if you're not comfortable in answering any question for whatever reason, just say no answer. So, and goal is to finish this rapid fire segment in 60 seconds or less. So, I'll
Okay.
start from the first question. So, first question: quality of biotech drug products in India.
Eight.
Okay. Second, production capacity in India.
I would say 10 for large molecules like antibodies, 8 for cell therapy.
Okay. Innovation in India.
5, and I give it a 5 only because I believe that there isn't sufficient capital to support all the R&D ideas that are there.
Okay. IP protection in
8,
India. Okay. Adequate availability of talented workforce.
9.
Okay. Productive interactions among peers.
A 9,
Okay. Capital available, public or private, to support new ideas.
a 5.
Cost efficiency with an aim to reduce the cost of the drugs.
Uh,
Okay. And unambiguous guidelines for regulatory approval.
I think for established classes of drugs like small molecules and such, it would be an 8 or a 9. I would say for new classes like cell therapies, gene therapies, probably more like a 6 or a 7.
Okay. And finally, question number 10, make in India efforts. Okay. So that ends our rapid fire questions and actually the this particular conversation also, the podcast. So thank you, Mike, for
Thank
coming to
you,
the
Arun.
stage and giving your views and so much of advice for the younger generation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day.